Close your eyes and imagine a smoky stage somewhere in the late 1960s. Neon lights reflecting on a cherry red Gibson guitar. A lanky figure sliding his fingertips across the strings to produce a sound so raw and electrifying it practically rips open the night air. That searing tone belongs to Duane Allman, a young musician whose passion and brilliance would soon redefine American rock. Even though he left this world at only 24, his influence still roars through classic recordings and the countless guitarists who have tried, often in vain, to recapture that Duane Allman magic. But behind the iconic solos and jam band glory lies a complicated, sometimes heartbreaking story. A murdered father, a mother doing what she could to keep her boys afloat, a brother who would become a lifelong musical partner, and a restless soul always searching for the perfect note. Duane Allman was born on November 20th, 1946 in Nashville, Tennessee, to Willis Allman and Geraldine Jerry Allman, née Robbins. From the outside, the Allmans might have seemed like a typical family. Just a father on active duty in the U.S. Army and a mother at home, raising Duane and later his younger brother Greg. But illusions of normalcy vanished far too soon. Duane's father Willis had served in World War II, rising to a second lieutenant rank. In late 1949, while the family was living near Norfolk, Virginia, Willis was tragically murdered during an armed robbery. The man convicted of the killing, Michael Robert Buddy Green, was hardly the only one affected. This violent act left Geraldine a widow and her two boys fatherless. Duane was only a toddler at the time, but that loss haunted the entire family for years. With no partner to support her, Geraldine had to retrain as an accountant and look for ways to keep Duane and Greg safe. She enrolled them both at Castle Heights Military Academy in Lebanon, Tennessee, hoping the structure might help them cope, or at least keep them occupied, while she rebuilt her life. Duane and Greg, still very young, found the experience miserable. They disliked the formal discipline, the uniforms, the endless drills. Grief is one thing, but grief in a military academy can feel especially isolating. Both boys yearned for a more normal childhood. Eventually, in 1957, Geraldine moved the family to Daytona Beach, Florida, which seemed like a world away from Castle Heights. There, the Allman brothers could finally attend Seabreeze High School, soak in the Florida sun, and attempt to find whatever version of childhood they had left. Each summer, they would journey back to Nashville to spend time with their grandmother, bridging those two worlds, sun-drenched Daytona and the hillier environs of Tennessee. Greg discovered a love for music first, learning basic guitar chords from a neighbor in Florida. Around 1960, when Greg was about 13, he spent hard-saved cash on a Japanese-made Teisco Silvertone guitar. Duane, meanwhile, had decided to buy himself a Harley 165 motorbike instead. He was left-handed but had no qualms about playing guitar right-handed if he ever got around to practicing. In time, Duane became fascinated by the strings he saw in Greg's hands. At first, the two boys tussled over that Silvertone, who got to play it, who was hogging it, and so forth, until fate intervened. Duane crashed his motorbike, a wreck that left him shaken and probably thinking, maybe that guitar is safer than the open road. He traded the ruined bike for a Silvertone of his own. Geraldine recognized her son's budding musical obsession and eventually purchased Duane a Gibson Les Paul Jr. Now both siblings were armed with real instruments, forging an alliance that would define them for the rest of their short but meaningful time together. One evening in Nashville, Duane and Greg managed to see B.B. King perform live. That moment changed everything. As the two watched King coax unbelievable emotion from his guitar, Duane turned to Greg and declared, "We got to get into this." The elder brother dove headfirst into guitar studies, soon surpassing Greg in technical prowess. Even though Greg would one day become the iconic voice of the Allman Brothers Band, Duane's determination to master the guitar was unstoppable. By 1961, both boys had begun playing publicly, trying their luck in various local groups around Daytona Beach and beyond. During his high school years, Duane simply couldn't tear himself away from music. He left school altogether to practice guitar without distraction. By 1965, an early group called the Escorts opened for the Beach Boys in a brief flash of local success, but that band soon disintegrated. Some of its members reformed as the Allman Joys, a moniker that nodded to Duane and Greg's last name while also suggesting a sunny brand of rock. The Allman Joys gigged across the Southeast, eventually pulling Greg fully into the lineup after he finished high school. The band tried their luck in Nashville, playing in clubs or anywhere they could. Soon they pivoted to Los Angeles with a new name, Hourglass, and landed a deal with Liberty Records. It might have seemed like the big break they needed, but Hourglass never gained the traction they hoped for. By early 1968, the group dissolved. Greg had to stay in California to tie up legal obligations from their record contract, while Duane returned to Florida, playing demos with a band called the 31st of February, which included drummer Butch Trucks. Even then, he didn't want to jump straight into another official band. He was drifting, working on sessions, jamming in the region, and exploring how far his guitar could take him. In late 1968, on his birthday, legend has it, Duane confronted a small pivot point that would change rock history. Sidelined with an elbow injury after falling from a horse, he was stuck at home, bored and restless. Greg gifted him Taj Mahal's debut album and a bottle of Coricidin pills, presumably to ease his discomfort. Duane had another idea. He emptied the pill bottle, washed off the label, and slid it over his finger to experiment. That day, he started teaching himself slide guitar, meticulously learning Statesboro blues by ear. The distinctive squeal of that Coricidin bottle slide would become one of the defining features of the Allman Brothers sound and of Southern rock as a whole. Yet Duane's big leap into the professional scene came not through a permanent band, but via session work. As far back as early 1966, he had been hired for a major recording date in Nashville's RCA Studio B, contributing guitar lines to the Vogue's first album under the guidance of producer Tony Moon. But the real eye-opener happened in 1968 when Duane recorded at the famed FAME Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Producers Rick Hall and Jerry Wexler heard something downright explosive in Duane's playing. For $10,000, Rick Hall bought out Duane's existing contract, taking him under Fame's umbrella. That move positioned Duane on the threshold of greatness, letting him collaborate with a dizzying array of stars: Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, Otis Rush, King Curtis, Percy Sledge, Clarence Carter, Laura Nyro, Delaney and Bonnie, Boz Scaggs, even jazz flautist Herbie Mann. This was no mere background guitarist strumming chords. Duane was pumping fire into those records. His moment of real breakout recognition came with Wilson Pickett's cover of Hey Jude in 1968. Duane's soulful lead break at the end of the track blew away Atlantic executives, none more than Jerry Wexler, who championed Duane to other producers. Eric Clapton heard that same Hey Jude guitar solo and felt thunderstruck. He later recalled how that searing performance made him think, "Who is this guy?" Duane was well on his way to establishing a legend. He'd pop into sessions, get paid in cash, often go uncredited, and vanish. Decades later, fans and music historians would frantically try to piece together every cameo he made, but the exact list is nearly impossible to compile. Friends from the Muscle Shoals era remember him strolling in spontaneously, offering to lay down a part, and then off he went to the next gig or jam. Despite enjoying the session scene, Duane felt there was something missing, a band family, a home base for his unstoppable creativity. By early 1969, he had begun assembling what would become the Allman Brothers Band, pulling together trusted musicians like Butch Trucks on drums. J-Mo Johansson, another drummer from Muscle Shoals, joined the fold. Barry Oakley on bass and Dickie Betts on guitar signed on too. All they needed was Greg. He was still marooned in California, dealing with contract obligations and struggling to go solo. Eventually, Duane's persistence paid off. Greg returned to Florida, stepped in on vocals and keyboards, and just like that, the Allman Brothers Band was born. They made a conscious effort to blend blues, jazz, rock, and that intangible Southern flavor that soon would make them legends. It wasn't just about pounding out hits. The Allman Brothers valued improvisation and interplay. Duane, especially, wanted the band's live shows to be events where anything could happen. And when they hopped up to New York to record their self-titled debut album in September 1969, they captured that raw synergy. But success didn't erupt overnight. It was the 1970 follow-up album, Idlewild South, produced by Tom Dowd, that nudged them further into the spotlight. Touring relentlessly, the group began crafting a reputation for marathon jam sessions that showcased Duane's electrifying solos, as well as Greg's raspy, emotional voice. One fateful night in August 1970, after a show in Miami, Duane Allman crossed paths with Eric Clapton. At that time, Clapton was part of Derek and the Dominoes, a new band that included Bobby Whitlock, Jim Gordon, and Carl Rattle. They all wound up jamming together at Criteria Studios, discovering, to their delight, that Duane and Eric had near telepathic chemistry. Eric was so floored that he invited Duane to join the recording sessions for what would become Layla and other assorted love songs. Duane, starstruck by Clapton but also fiercely proud of the Allman Brothers, decided to take a hybrid approach. He wouldn't abandon his own band, but he also wouldn't pass up the chance to create music with Clapton. The result was guitar history. Duane's signature slide soared alongside Clapton's Fender leads, especially on the iconic tracks Layla and Bell Bottom Blues. Their dual lines wove together like two eagles swirling in a high-altitude dance, each inspiring the other to push further. If you listen closely, Duane's parts typically have that full-tilt, high-octane wail from a Gibson, whereas Clapton leans into a Strat tone. Clapton would later say Duane was the musical brother I'd never had. For all the love and excitement, Duane remained firmly in the Allman Brothers Band, only stepping in with Derek and the Dominoes occasionally. Fans got a taste of that synergy live when Duane appeared with them briefly on December 1st and 2nd, 1970, but never for a full Derek and the Dominoes tour. Right around that time, the Allman Brothers started working on what would become At Fillmore East, recorded in March 1971 at promoter Bill Graham's legendary New York venue. It was a pivotal moment not just for them, but for live rock albums in general. Duane's extended solos on numbers like Whipping Post and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed set an entirely new bar. His approach was often informed by the jazz records he devoured, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue and John Coltrane's My Favorite Things, as well as B.B. King's blues phrasing. While many guitarists in rock stuck to pentatonic scales, Duane ventured into modal jamming, melodic improvisations, and interplay that invoked the spontaneity of jazz. The result? At Fillmore East felt like a force of nature, capturing a band in full flight, its anchor and fiery lead voice none other than Duane Allman, whose nickname, Sky Dog, matched his intense high-flying style. Even as the band soared professionally, Duane's personal life was messy. In 1969, He had met Donna Rusman in St. Louis, and they had a daughter named Galadriel. That relationship did not last, and Duane's romantic ties were often fleeting. There were rumors of another earlier daughter from a woman named Patty Chandley, although this child was said to be deaf. Duane never married, but fatherhood clearly affected him. Years later, Galadriel would author Please Be With Me, a Song for My Father, a reflective look at the man she never really got to know, except through stories, tape reels, and the memory of those who were close to him. By autumn 1971, the Allman Brothers Band was a juggernaut, riding high on the success of At Fillmore East. They had become, almost overnight, a defining act of the new decade, bridging the gap between blues and rock with an authenticity that fans devoured. Duane was at the height of his powers, an in-demand session guitarist, a pivotal founding member of a hot-selling band, and a revered figure among fellow musicians. But fate had other plans. On October 29, 1971, Duane was riding his Harley-Davidson Sportster through the streets of Macon, Georgia, specifically on Hillcrest Avenue. It was a break from touring and recording, and he'd likely been feeling carefree, or maybe just eager to blow off steam. A flatbed truck carrying a crane approached, forcing Duane to swerve at high speed. The motorcycle collided, sending him flying, and he was briefly pinned under the weight of the bike. Rushed to the hospital, he was still alive on arrival. Doctors worked frantically to save him, but the injuries were too severe. The 24-year-old guitar virtuoso died a few hours later from massive internal trauma. In a tragic symmetry, Barry Oakley, the band's bassist, would perish in a similar motorcycle accident only 3 blocks away from Duane's crash site about 13 months later, also at age 24. Duane's funeral took place on November 1, 1971, at Snow's Memorial Chapel in Macon. The place was packed, bandmates, family, friends, and music icons who had come to know this mercurial talent in the studio or on stage. Jerry Wexler spoke in eulogy, commending Duane for the unique fusion of gospel, R&B, blues, and rock he championed. Musicians performed, culminating with everyone joining in on Will the Circle Be Unbroken, a gospel staple that had deeper resonance given Duane's roots and influences. He was buried in Macon's Rose Hill Cemetery, a stone's throw from where Barry Oakley would also be laid to rest. Grief-stricken, the Allman Brothers Band made a momentous decision. They would carry on. They honored Duane by finishing the tracks they had started for a new album. That record, Eat a Peach, came out in February 1972 as a double LP containing a mix of live cuts, studio sessions that included Duane, and newly recorded material by the surviving 5 members. The album title derived from a memorable Duane Allman quote. In an interview, when someone asked how he planned to support the revolution, Duane responded, "Every time I'm in Georgia, I eat a peach for peace." The statement was just cryptic and whimsical enough to capture Duane's spirit and ended up becoming a poignant memorial. Songs like Blue Sky and the epic Mountain Jam showcased both the band's resilience and the gaping hole left by Duane's absence. In the months and years that followed, fans and critics clamored for any recorded snippet of Duane's playing. Capricorn Records obliged with releases like an anthology in 1972 and its sequel, an Anthology Volume 2, in 1974, collections that tried to gather his scattered session work and various live performances. Because Duane had never been meticulous about credits or finances, these anthologies gave the world a broader glimpse into the many lives he touched as a session guitarist. Meanwhile, the Allman Brothers, although profoundly changed, became even bigger after Eat a Peach, continuing to define Southern rock through the 70s. Yet many purists would always say the group was never the same without Duane's fearless guitar. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music world. Ronnie Van Zant from Lynyrd Skynyrd often dedicated Freebird to Duane at live shows. Though Freebird was written before Duane's passing, Van Zant's references made it feel like an elegy to a kindred spirit. In Mississippi, a group of college students from Hines Junior College spray-painted "Remember Duane Allman" near Interstate 20 in 1973, and a photo of their graffiti ended up in Rolling Stone. The memorial stayed visible for over a decade, a silent testimony to how deeply Duane's artistry resonated with everyday fans. Eventually, Duane's legacy received formal recognition. In 1995, the Allman Brothers Band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, with Duane honored posthumously as a founding member. The state of Georgia dedicated a stretch of State Highway 19 in Macon as Duane Allman Boulevard. Elsewhere in that city, you'll find the Big House Museum, once the band's communal home, and the H&H Restaurant, famous for feeding hungry musicians who had more talent than money. Nearly everywhere you turn in Macon, there's a piece of Duane's story woven into the landscape, from the guitar-laden exhibits to the quiet corners where he once jammed with friends. His daughter Galadriel grew up hearing only stories about the father she lost as an infant. As an adult, she curated the 2013 release Skydog, the Duane Allman Retrospective, a 7-CD collection. The in-depth project drew together as many session tracks, alternate takes, and live recordings as they could find, showcasing just how versatile and restless Duane had been. In interviews, Galadriel has described the emotional weight of exploring a father's legacy that everyone else knows better than she does. Beyond the tangibles, box sets, highways, anthologies, there's the intangible influence Duane had on guitar culture. The Coricidin bottle slide technique that he popularized became a template. Younger players like Derek Trucks carried that approach forward, literally continuing the tradition within the Allman Brothers Band. Joe Walsh, Gary Rossington, and countless others have cited Duane as an inspiration. Don Felder of the Eagles learned the basics of slide guitar directly from Duane himself. Clapton always spoke of Duane with reverence, praising the intuitive synergy they discovered during the Layla sessions. In an old interview, Duane gave a quick tip on how to distinguish Clapton's playing from his on those tracks. Clapton used a Fender Strat, Duane used a Gibson. If the lead you're hearing has that throaty, screaming Gibson vibe, that's Duane, and once you know it, you can't miss it. Duane's personal style was shaped by more than just the blues. He absorbed lessons from jazz titans like Miles Davis and John Coltrane, who approach music as a living conversation, each solo a moment of self-expression. That explains how Duane could extend a relatively simple blues progression into a swirling 20-minute jam that never lost its intensity. He was always listening, reacting, and injecting a piece of his own soul into each phrase. Bandmates talked about how he'd put on Kinda Blue or Coltrane's My Favorite Things over and over, gleaning new voicings for his guitar. So while people might see the Allman Brothers as a pure Southern rock outfit, the reality is that Duane was fusing multiple genres inside his heart.